morning, everybody. And hello to everybody joining us online. I'm Hillary. I'm pretty excited to be here talking to you about something a little bit different and a little bit fun. I'm the co-founder of a company called Hit Endure, where we make any work of fiction a playable story. That is a creative experience. And I'm going to talk today about the opportunities we have right now, particularly with a few emerging technologies such as few-shot learning, large language models, to start to build these sorts of creative experiences, and what we need to think about when we design these kinds of data products, because they are a little bit different than some of the other examples we've seen. This is not just a regression. I've been doing this for a long time. So I was the founder of a company called Fast Forward Labs that joined with Cloudera and built a lot of applications where we thought about emerging machine learning capabilities and how they could be made useful. And so here are a few examples from that work, including language generation, summarization, causal inference, interpretability with things like LIME and SHAP. And the art of creating these products has changed so much in only the last few years. So data products are products that can't exist without their underlying data, and we might add on those machine learning and AI capabilities. And I know this is incredibly obvious, but I often find that when we walk into rooms, we need to make sure we're using the same vocabulary so we know what we're talking about. And data products are absolutely everywhere. And perhaps the classic old one is the weather prediction, right? Perhaps the oldest data product we all use. But as we gain the technical ability to manipulate and build systems around language, we start to be able to use the frameworks for building data products and analytics to work on things that are largely around human communication. We start to be able to extend our understanding of data products into products that can communicate with us using language, which is the same interface we use to communicate with each other. And so we start to be able to think about things like customer service as a data product. And I know we have all had that experience of clicking the chat with a representative and not being sure if we're talking to a bot or a person yet. And so we have a ways to go to figure this out. And it's fun to think that here we are in 2022, and we're actually really good at this. If we think back to the conversations we were having 10, 12 years ago, they were all about big data and just being able to have the tools to be able to count something accurately in that data without having to build a whole bunch of custom systems to do it. And today we have those tools. We've been hearing about them all morning. We have incredible infrastructure that makes it fairly trivial for teams to spin things up easily. But we also have good practices around data, around building teams around data, around the skills we expect people to have with those data. And we have emerging and increasingly interesting capabilities with respect to what we can build on that data. That is our algorithms, our methodologies. And these things are changing continuously. Some of them change in a slow and linear way, like perhaps there's a project that's really exciting and you see it getting more interest, and then it becomes less risky and more useful, and so more people adopt it, and you can see it over time as something you want to learn about and start to use in your own practice and your own team. Some things, though, change in the way that they offer a new step function capability that perhaps we didn't really see coming, or we thought it was coming a little bit further out, or that offer us not just the ability to improve something we're already doing, but the ability to actually think about and build entirely new things. And this, for the data practitioners in the room, is why we will never be bored and why we'll never be unemployed for long. And a few of these capabilities that we're seeing today are things like foundational models, particularly drawing out few-shot learning. That is the ability to show something, a couple of examples in a prompt, and have it quickly be able to mimic the task as it is demonstrated, or even single-shot learning. And large language models, which can also generate text or completions from these prompts. And these are things that are getting a ton of attention, but are still struggling to find their place in products, which is why they are at an exciting moment for us to start to think about them. And while we largely see them show up as toys and things like DALL-E and some of the other image generation stuff, It's important to remember that these things are themselves not creative systems, but people are creative. So in these examples, we have a colleague of mine sharing a poem, and the image is Mid-Journey generated from that poem, which are beautiful. We have someone playing with Dolly generating desserts and desserts. But these are still really toys, and what is interesting about this is the prompt, that somebody thought of that prompt. And when you have these kinds of changes, we have this opportunity to start to think about new products, and we're seeing that now in this area. And this is a reference to an article I wrote years ago about how to really build an excellent data strategy as opposed to a mediocre or a failing one. But the idea behind it is that when we have this new capability, we have to experiment and start to see where it might be useful. We need communities of people experimenting. And we also encounter new challenges that we have to figure out how to resolve. In particular, and I'll speak about this a little bit more, issues with bias in some of these trained models. And so I hope you see this as an opportunity to be imaginative and to build some new things, and to take on that risk as part of a coherent data strategy, even if it may not be obvious where exactly it's going to pay out. It is worthwhile. One of the things in working on a project like this I've started thinking about a lot in the last couple years is how do we even build data products when we have no notion of quantitative correctness? We don't have these easy objective functions or error metrics we're trying to optimize. And this emerges in many products. It is not at all new. And in fact, I think I could make the argument that some of the most transformational data products of our time are products of this variety, where there is no one correct answer. If you think about the formulation of the problem of web search as potentially trillions of potential results that need to be ranked in real time as they are changing underneath you, given a query that may be in natural language, there is no one right answer. And so we have approximations to answers, and we have experimentation, and we have product analysis and product metrics. Another great area for this is content discovery. Anytime you go load up any media site or you're on Netflix and it's offering you things to watch. These are all examples of this sort of class of problem. And it's not new. You might even be working on one of these yourself. And we don't often like to admit it to ourselves as data scientists when things are not clean and they are not neat and there is no easy function. And sometimes we don't know whether a result is good or great. And I left failure out here because we know when something is failing. But with these sorts of product experiences, we often have to go to product metrics to understand what good and great look like. And we need to have good taste. And that's not something we often think about as data practitioners. And it is fun, and it is dangerous, and it is potentially the most creative work we might be doing. So something to get excited about. So how do we do this well? Well, first, this is about having the right skills and the right teams. And this means potentially thinking about changing some of those things. Anytime you have work that has to go from one brain to another, you introduce friction. And anytime you have work that has to go from one team to another, you might as well communicate via the medium of PowerPoints. Things will break. So thinking about structures that are focused on product outcomes, not necessarily just on data outcomes or uptime or SLAs. Thinking about designing products that condense information to make it useful to your human being on the other end of the product, that help them get to their destination, that bring them joy in the journey of getting there. This particular art is not about building automated systems to make decisions and disintermediating people. It's about helping people make better decisions because of products that can visualize complex changing information for them in a way that they can then react to. And this is perhaps the most technically provocative thing I want to say today. Use composable architectures. So prioritize tunable components. When you're creating a product, you may not know what the best experience is going to be. That means ensemble methods. It means having as much interpretability as your system can allow. And it means we cannot abdicate our design to a giant model. Deep learning in the sky is not going to save us all. We have to understand what goes in, what happens, what comes out, to build things that we can compose and tune artistically as well as quantitatively. This also is important when we work with models that may have underlying ethical challenges or bias because of how they're trained. That means I don't think we should avoid them, but it means we need to be deeply aware of those issues and to build systems on either side that capture and mitigate as much of that as possible. And that means empathy. So what this looks like in practice, I'll share a couple of examples from more traditional industries, one from a project I worked on a few years ago where we helped commodities traders make better decisions about their strategy based on summarizing about 15,000 news articles a day for them with a personalized summary based on what was in their portfolio. So a lot of cool abstractive summarization, but largely tuned around making the job of someone who, before they had this tool, would sit in their email reading PDFs for hours simpler, so they could access that information and make a decision. It is creative, deeply creative. Another example was using language generation in customer support to suggest ways that agents could interact with customers to lead to better outcomes for a large bank. That one also involved a little bit of content discovery because we were trying to figure out what was actually going wrong based on signals in their accounts using language generation and summarization again. And this stuff is actually working in practice today. And I fully believe that the next great set of transformational data products, like the ones we've seen in the past, will be ones that are creative experiences. And what we're working on at Hidden Door is the technology to take any work of fiction and then make it a playable story for you and your friends to play together. It's essentially like an AI dungeon master, and for those of you who are not deep in the RPG world, in the gaming world, it's a system that uses text as an interface and improvises stories along with you, using these large models to provide essentially a trope machine, understanding that people are creative, and what matters to you is the story that you want to tell with your friends and family. This means also that bad models just won't work. And so particularly in our architecture, we've built models off of millions of stories, are using large language models for generation, but solving a bit of a different problem where we take the unstructured input, structure it into a data structure, and then generate text and art dynamically out of a data structure, which gives a lot of control, composability, and allows folks who are designers and fluent with language to be able to tune the system independently from the ML research that's going on. This also means that when folks give us that input, they can take that story in whatever direction they like. So once again, I think designing these kinds of creative data products requires a little bit of flexibility in the way we think about our skills as data practitioners. It is only becoming possible now because of the emergence of these large models and the ability to easily play with them. And that's something we can't forget about, that things like having these few-shot learning capabilities let us, with a little bit of prompt engineering, which isn't even programming, start to prototype something that might be 80% accurate to understand if it's worth going in that direction at all. These are human affordances we get out of this. All of this pulled together with some changes in the way we build these products, the teams we organize around them, are leading to an opportunity for all of us to start to think about the creative products we might build, whether they're in entertainment, whether they're in finance, whether it's in customer support, whatever it may be. Anywhere that language is the interface is an opportunity. So thank you very much. And if our stuff sounds like fun, come sign up and play. Thank you.